Jordan Reyes walked into the cafeteria like she did every day, without a sound, without a smile, without any care for the glares that followed her tall frame, moved with the calm of someone who had seen too much to be rattled by plastic trays and cafeteria gossip. Her boots thudded against the linoleum with a rhythm that drew attention. Not because she demanded it, but because her silence made others uncomfortable. Her classmates watched her like a ghost, moving through their perfect little college world, whispering just loud enough to be heard but never brave enough to speak to her face. Not that she would answer anyway. Not that she would bother, because Jordan had already lived through hell, and this was just lunch. She took her usual seat near the back beneath a flickering light. At a table no one else ever chose, the kind of spot someone takes when they have trained their whole body to stay out of the blast zone. She peeled the wrapper off her protein bar with one hand, eyes, never leaving the room, scanning for exits, calculating movements. The habit of a soldier never leaves, especially one trained to kill. With silence, her gaze passed over Samantha and her crew, the loud ones, the beautiful ones, the cruel ones they called themselves the V Squad, short for victorious or maybe venomous. No one knew they ruled the social halls of campus like high school never ended, and today their prey was once again the quiet woman in combat boots and a dead stare. Samantha leaned toward her friend Maddie, whispering something sharp enough to draw laughter. A flick of her phone camera aimed at Jordan, a flash disguised as a selfie. Jordan didn't flinch, but she knew she had been marked again, a joke maybe, or a meme by tonight. Her face would be floating through private group chats, captioned with something clever, something mean, the kind of digital warfare these girls excelled in. Jordan chewed slowly, each bite. A measured silence, her body still, her mind calculating every breath. In the room, she was used to being targeted, used to being underestimated, but something about today was different. Something about their laughter, something about the edge in Samantha's voice felt like a tripwire had just snapped inside her chest. Across the room, a tray clattered to the floor, drawing eyes for a second, and in that moment, Samantha stood up with the exaggerated confidence of someone who never had to earn respect, just command it. She strolled toward Jordan, her voice light but loaded. With poison, she made a comment about military cosplay, about how Halloween came early, about how some people took dress up too seriously, and her friends laughed on cue. But Jordan just looked up, her eyes dark and unreadable, not angry, not hurt, just aware, like something in her had been triggered, something old and quiet and buried deep beneath years of discipline. She said nothing, but the stillness in her body screamed louder than any insult ever could. Samantha reached out to tap the table. In front of Jordan, a mock gesture of friendliness, but her hand hovered just a little too close. And that was when Jordan moved, not violently, not loudly, just moved with such speed and precision that the tray Samantha leaned on flipped with the weight of a fingertip clattering to the floor between them, a perfect distance calculated not to hit, but to warn the entire cafeteria. Paused, eyes shifting from phones to faces, to the unfolding tension between the soldier and the queen bee, Samantha. Stepped back, lips parted, unsure if she had just imagined what happened. Unsure if it had been an accident or something else, something intentional, something dangerous. Jordan stood slowly, her full height now dwarfing Samantha by a head. Her voice, low controlled, a whisper honed through training and fire. She asked a single question, but it landed like a loaded weapon. "Do you think this is a game?" And the silence that followed stretched like a wire across the room, waiting to snap. Samantha opened her mouth to respond, but found no words, just a hollow laugh and a nervous glance toward her friends, who suddenly seemed much farther away. Jordan stepped past her, not bothering to make eye contact, not bothering to explain herself, because she had already seen what came next. She had already chosen not to be provoked, but that didn't mean she had forgotten how to end things when they needed ending. The cafeteria buzzed back to life in fragments, whispers swirled like dust in the air, and Samantha returned to her table with a laugh that sounded too tight, too forced, trying to reclaim power that had slipped through her fingers like sand. But Jordan knew better. She recognized the shift in energy, the way predators pull back when they realize their prey has claws. She sat again, back straight eyes forward, not hungry anymore, not angry either, just waiting, because she could feel something was coming. Something bigger than insults and cafeteria games. Something she had been trained to face, and trained to end with quiet efficiency. What none of them knew, not Samantha, not her entourage, not even the curious onlookers now texting furiously under tables, was that Jordan Reyes had not come here to make friends. She had come here to disappear. To finish a degree quietly, to build a new life from the pieces left behind, after the missions, after the medals, after the funeral flags, folded into tight, perfect triangles. She had survived ambushes and betrayals and nights when the only thing that kept her breathing was the promise of a day like today. A day when she could walk among civilians and pretend that she was whole again. But now the game had changed, and the rules were starting to shift, and Jordan could feel the old instincts, waking up one by one like a fire slowly catching across dry earth. And in that final moment, just before the bell rang, just before everyone scattered and the show ended, Samantha turned around with a smile, a different smile, one filled with something colder. Not fear, not yet, but something close. And she said 4 words in a voice too sweet to trust. "We're not done yet." And Jordan didn't answer, didn't move, but her eyes locked onto Samantha's retreating form, and she knew this wasn't about lunch anymore. This was about territory and reputation and something deeper. Something neither of them fully understood, but Jordan Reyes was no stranger to war. And if war was what was coming, she would not back down. Not this time. Not again. And what came next would leave more than just whispers in the cafeteria. The classroom was colder than usual the next morning, or maybe it was just the way Jordan felt. The room, the fluorescent lights buzzing slightly above her head, the scrape of chairs, the sound of forced laughter and tapping keyboards, all blending into a dull static that didn't touch her. She had arrived early, always did. Always scanned her surroundings before settling in her back. Never to adore, her eyes flicking between students, as they drifted in each of them carrying phones and whispers and glances. None of them bold enough to approach, yet not after what happened in the cafeteria yesterday. Not after the moment when silence became a weapon. Samantha entered 15 minutes late, her entrance loud on purpose. Her coffee cup held like a trophy. Her voice pitched to carry across the room as she recounted some story about her night out laced with details that probably weren't true, but that didn't matter what. Mattered was the way her group laughed a little too hard, a little too sharp, like a pack trying to reassert its dominance in the wake of something that had shaken their hierarchy. Samantha's eyes flicked once toward Jordan, then back to her friends. And Jordan caught it, that flash of uncertainty behind all the noise, like a mask slipping for a fraction of a second before snapping back into place. Professor Adler arrived, cutting through the tension like a scalpel. His voice crisp as he outlined the group assignment that would carry a significant portion of their final grade. He listed names pairing students into trios, and Jordan heard hers last, along with Samantha and one other name she didn't recognize. The room stilled again in the kind of awkward silence that follows a lightning strike. No one said anything, but everyone heard it. Samantha turned slowly, her smile brittle and painted on as she made her way to Jordan's table, each step deliberate, each breath measured, as if walking into a territory claimed by something far older and far more dangerous than she was ready to face. Their third group member was a soft-spoken student named Erin, who clearly wanted to be anywhere else, her eyes wide as she sat between them, the tension so thick she could hardly hold her pen. Jordan gave her a single nod, calm and composed, and then laid out a plan for the project that was efficient, clear, and quietly brilliant. Samantha didn't speak for several moments, then tried to joke about how she might actually let someone else do the thinking for once. But her voice cracked slightly at the end, and Jordan caught it again, that flicker of fear beneath the surface. Over the next few days, the three of them met in study rooms and libraries in quiet corners of campus where secrets lived. Jordan took the lead not by force, but by merit. Her knowledge sharp, her instructions clear, and every time Samantha tried to push back, Jordan responded with a stillness that made the air shift, made the lights feel dimmer, made even Aaron sit up straighter. Samantha started to show up on time, started to take notes, started to follow directions without snide comments or passive aggression. But it wasn't obedience. It was something else, something closer to watching a storm approach and realizing too late there's nowhere to run. One afternoon while reviewing data. In a quiet study hall, Samantha closed her laptop and stared at Jordan. Her voice low, controlled, different than it had ever sounded before, and she asked, "Who are you really?" And Jordan paused, not because she didn't know how to answer, but because no answer would make sense to someone who hadn't seen what she'd seen, who hadn't crawled through sand and blood and smoke. For a flag that sometimes felt heavier than the gear she carried, she didn't answer. Not with words. Instead, she handed Samantha a folder filled with documents for their project and said, "Read this first, and maybe then you'll understand what it means to carry responsibility that doesn't end when the assignment does." That night, Samantha didn't post anything, didn't laugh with her friends, didn't show up in any group chats because she had read the file, and inside, it wasn't about the project. It was a training dossier, a sanitized version, but enough to paint the picture. A list of missions timelines, a note from a commanding officer commending exceptional discipline under fire, and a psychological evaluation that spoke of resilience so intense it bordered on dangerous. Samantha sat alone in her dorm room staring at the pages, realizing the woman she mocked in a cafeteria had once walked into villages where no backup was coming and pulled children from buildings laced with traps and walked out with scars no one could see. The next day, Samantha returned the folder without a word, her face pale, her voice quiet, and Jordan accepted it like a soldier receiving coordinates. Not thanks. Not apologies, just data exchanged between two people who now shared an unspoken agreement. But the peace was temporary because the university had a way of twisting calm into conflict, and within a week the group was invited to present their work in front of faculty and students, and that was when the rumors started again. Only this time, they were not about Jordan. They were about Samantha, and whispers spread that she had been humbled, broken, changed, and there were those who didn't like that. Someone leaked part of the file Jordan had given Samantha, only fragments. Not enough to expose her fully, but enough to raise questions enough to make Jordan look dangerous to people who never served, never sacrificed, people who judged through screens and speculations. Suddenly, professors were pulling her aside, asking if she felt okay, if she needed to talk, if she could tone down her presence. And Jordan realized then that this wasn't over. It was evolving, becoming something colder, something coordinated, because she had rattled the wrong cages, and the blowback was starting to rise like a tide. She went to the gym that night late past midnight, when no one else was around, and she trained in silence fists, pounding the bag over and over until her knuckles throbbed with memory, not pain. She moved through her drills the way a pianist plays scales, the way a wolf circles its territory. Not because it's afraid, but because it knows what's coming. And then she stopped, frozen for a moment, sensing something. Someone she turned slowly and saw a shadow in the hallway just outside the glass. A shape watching, not moving, not hiding, and her instincts screamed louder than her thoughts, louder than reason, because something was wrong, something was off. Something was about to break. Jordan stood still. Breath-low body, silent, heart steady, like it had been trained to do in black zones, where the only thing separating life from death was silence and timing. The shape outside the glass didn't move, didn't flinch. It just watched. And even though the hallway was dark, the way the lights bounced off the polished floor gave her enough to see enough to know it wasn't a janitor or a student or anyone with a reason to be here this late. The stance was wrong. Too rigid, too intentional, whoever it was stood like someone used to control, someone used to being watched, but not seen. And Jordan felt it again, that flicker in her gut, the one that used to come right before things exploded in the field. She moved, slowly toward the door. Not rushing, not blinking eyes fixed on the figure, but as she reached the edge of the glass, the hallway was empty. The shape gone without a sound, and she opened the door in one motion, sliding into the corridor like a shadow. Herself, but there was nothing, no footsteps, no echo, no hint of where the figure went. And for a moment she questioned herself, not because she doubted what she saw, but because the enemy had always been ghosts before they were bodies, and she had learned that the first rule of a new threat was that it always introduced itself in silence. The next morning she arrived early to class again, this time scanning every corner, every shadow, watching reflections in windows and doors. Like they were trap wires waiting to twitch, the atmosphere felt off colder, more brittle. The kind of tension that came before a storm. Not the loud, dramatic kind, but the kind that crept under skin and made people act strange. Even Samantha noticed it giving Jordan a look like she had questions she was too scared to ask. Erin didn't say anything, but sat closer than usual, her hands fidgeting with the edges of her notebook, and Jordan realized that whatever had started was no longer just about her. It was about proximity, about who stood too close to her now. After class, Professor Adler pulled her aside, his face serious, but his tone wrapped in that careful concern reserved for students labeled as potential threats. He said there had been a message left for him about her, an anonymous tip that she had a violent past, that she was unstable, that she had threatened a student. And while the university didn't believe it fully, they had to investigate. And Jordan listened in silence because she had heard this before. Not in classrooms, but in barracks and operations briefings, where rumors planted at the right time could end careers. Or worse, she knew this was strategic. She knew this was war. She went to the dean's office that afternoon, not to beg not to argue, but to ask one question directly. Do you want the truth or do you want peace? Because I can give you one, but not both. And the dean, a woman with kind eyes and a politician's smile, said, "We just want to make sure everyone feels safe." And Jordan realized then that safe didn't mean protected. It meant comfortable. And people like her made others uncomfortable, not because of what she did, but because of what she could do. Because deep down, civilians liked their warriors broken. Quiet, grateful, not walking around reminding them that safety was earned, not given. That night, she received a text from an unknown number. Just 3 words, leave or expose, followed by an image of her sitting in the library, face down in a notebook. Unaware she was being watched, and beneath it another photo, this time of Samantha, walking alone to her car, and Jordan felt the shift inside her, the one she tried so hard to bury beneath books and lectures, the one forged in deserts and war zones, and lost the one that knew how to hunt and how to disappear, because this wasn't just bullying anymore. This was targeting, and someone had crossed a line without realizing that Jordan Reyes didn't retreat. She recalibrated. She didn't call the police, not yet. She didn't report the threat because that would take it out of her hands, and Jordan had never trusted systems to protect her. Not in war, not in peace. She spent the night scanning the photo, metadata, checking timestamps, reviewing. Security footage from the gym, from the campus halls, all publicly accessible. If you knew how to look, and what she found wasn't a name, but a habit. Whoever sent the text had a pattern. They watched from corners that lacked cameras, stayed within. Blind spots, and always lingered just long enough to leave a message, but not long enough to be caught. That meant they were trained, not just paranoid trained. The next day, she approached Samantha during lunch quietly, directly, and asked a question. That made the girl pale, instantly. "Has anyone followed you home? And Samantha didn't answer at first, then nodded slowly and said she thought she was being dramatic, that it was just her imagination, that maybe she had pissed off the wrong person. Online. And Jordan told her, no, this isn't online. This is personal. And whoever they are, they're getting braver, which means they're about to act. They decided to set a trap that night. Nothing elaborate, just a staged meetup in the far end of the library. After hours, Samantha would leave alone, make it look like she was walking back to her car. Jordan would watch from above, from the second floor hidden between stacks near the window with a direct line of sight, and Erin, their quiet third. Group member would stand near the doors under the pretense of waiting for a friend, her role simple text the moment someone followed Samantha. Everything went according to plan, until it didn't because at 8:42 p.m., Jordan saw Samantha leave on schedule, saw Erin give the signal, saw a shape peel away from the edge of the building and begin to follow exactly as expected, but then another shadow moved from the far side of the lot, and Jordan realized with a spike of adrenaline, they weren't dealing. With one person, there were two, one trailing Samantha and one watching the watcher, and then Erin's text came through, not a warning, just one word run, and Jordan moved. Jordan launched forward without a sound, her breath even her mind, sharp every step a calculation built on years of instincts honed through fire. She reached the first figure just as he reached for Samantha, and in one fluid motion brought him down her knee, pressed into his spine, her voice low-controlled, "Do not move," and he listened because something in her tone broke through the false courage in his veins. She looked up, scanning, and saw the second figure slipping through shadows, trying to vanish. But she moved faster, cutting across the lot, her body low, a blur of muscle. And she caught him by the shoulder, spun him hard against the wall, his hood falling, revealing a face she did not expect, not a stranger, but a student from her ethics class. The quiet one who always sat alone and watched everyone without blinking, stammered something about justice, about fear, about exposure. But Jordan was already pulling out her phone, calling it in, because this time she wouldn't disappear. This time she wanted them to know exactly who she was and what happened when someone tried.